How do you like, I guess, cope with and like accept that there are things you can't have control over and like deal with like wanting to have control over these things? And then also, where do you think that need for control comes from?
My brother is married. A few months ago, and she's a nice woman. As women go, she's quite nice. She enjoys micromanaging things. Hello. Her father's the same way. Her poor mother, has been under an avalanche of her daughter and her husband's brute forces. She's kind of been punished into silence for the most part. Very nice people, regardless. Hello. A few months ago, she was diagnosed with cancer. It's okay. You go through chemo, you go through radiation, but it's not so much the cancer that matters. It's a shock to your system that for the past like 35, 40 years you've had control over everything, conversation, your husband, your kid, the way the house should look. How often can your in-laws come over your house? What do you define as a person who's educated or someone who's relatively dumb? And it gives rise to a certain kind of arrogance that contaminates all of us, really, for the most part. And that's what health does, really. It forces you to forget. And one of the nice things about hanging out with people like Socrates is that they always have a tendency of reminding you that you suck, and you're sick, and you're diseased. And so every day you walk around kind of feeling bad about the day of your birth and the fact that you've amounted to nothing. So there is this humility that takes place inside you. And the moment you're diagnosed with cancer, your future becomes uncertain. You have no idea if you're going to survive. You have no idea if your husband is going to remarry. You have no idea what's going to happen to your child, what's going to happen to your body, if you're going to survive. So she had locked herself up in her room for the past, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. She went to my parents just a couple of days ago for the first time. She's very attractive, but because of chemo, you lose your hair and your body gains some weight. I have this really awful thought that comes to me once in a while. I hate comfort, and sometimes I feel too comfortable. And I look at my kids, and once in a while, one of them says, I have a stomach ache. No, it's nothing. I say, man, what if we went to the doctor and he was to tell us that he has cancer? It's like a tiny little kid. I would feel some confusion, which would be nice, some uncertainties, anger, and these are emotions that are constant. I mean, sure, after a while everything becomes normalized, but you can't survive without power and control. It's impossible. You need to have them. This is so boring. My kids are both hetero. And so it's just one less thing to deal with. But the language is everywhere now, the binary language. So once in a while they come home and they ask some questions, which is fun. Sometimes I say to myself, what if my son or my daughter, if they were to come home and they say, Dad, I have self-discovered. Oh, what have you discovered? If there is a God, God has given me the wrong body. Oh, what kind of a body do you want? I think I want to be a girl. And I look at their facial expression and I realize they're very earnest, sincere in what they're saying. And I try to joke around, not because it's a funny situation, but because it's just too much for me to deal with. So the saying by Søren Kierkegaard, the most melancholic of people have the best senses of humor. You joke not because life is funny, you joke because life is really quite sad, and the only way to combat sadness is through humor. I don't think I'll be around to see them graduate from high school or college or get married and grandkids and all that, but I still fantasize about, their future life. And should one of them come to me and say, I think I am this instead of that, then all the narratives I have built inside my psyche, well, they're going to be attacked by armies of worries. And so I'm sure I'll lay with my wife, and the only thing I want to talk about is what's going to happen. Is there a way to deal with this? And it's going to take a while for me to adjust, especially given that I am somewhat conservative. I've come from a completely different culture. And as I get older, that culture just blossoms more within me. So we like conformity in as much as we rail against it, in as much as we say, I want to be a hippie and go to like Yosemite and live in the forest, which I did for some time. There is a point where you say, this is pointless. I want to just go back to civilization. There are safe ways, there are people you can look at, talk to. Because in confusion, all the choices that used to make sense for you, they're no longer there. All the power you used to have, all the information that you use as pieces of tools. And so you kind of get stuck in this world where nothing makes any sense. And you want these emotions to go away. I was telling my class yesterday about these two people in one of the plays of Shakespeare, Ferdinand and Miranda. Ferdinand is a king. He has power. I mean, if you have power in your life, any branch of life, you are a king or a queen. You can exercise your power in any shape or form you desire. And he falls in love with some regular woman, commoner. And I mean, Shakespeare is really good with wrestling with the emotions that live inside us. He's a great psychologist if you read his plays carefully. Imagine when you realize you're a king and you have fallen in love with someone who has zero value for you. And love makes them valuable. Love turns them into a queen and turns you, a king, into like a servant or a slave of sorts. And you kneel before this woman. And there comes a point in his life where he says, I'm willing to give up my kingdom, my title, everything that I own. I just want to be with this woman. I forget if he was married or had children, but the moment you suddenly lose a good amount of your power and you kind of dive into the uncertainties, for the first time you have feelings and emotions. I mean, you really come to life and you pay attention. Now, it doesn't mean that you enjoy the sort of feelings and the thoughts that come and go, but it certainly does suggest that something about you no longer participates in everyday life. And though you may physically be there, emotionally and intellectually, you're just far away. So I had a lot of power when I was your age. It was good. I mean, I would have probably ended up in prison somewhere, but it was nice to just know where I'm going and what I'm doing and who my friends are and what they think about and how I feel and all those things. And when I met Hussein, everything changed. Little by little, I began to lose power, and it's not fun. It's not fun losing any power in any shape or form in any aspect of life. It's devastating because, what you do in life is you accumulate things, you accumulate power, and then you use them. And then once you lose that power, nothing makes any sense. I mean, you have to understand, we have 5,000 years of human culture. 5,000 years, that's no joke. It's like being in a marriage for like 30 years or 40 years. I don't know if you know the story of Pavarotti, this singer. Married for about 50 years, falls in love with a 30-year-old. The 30-year-old doesn't enjoy that particular genre of music. But a few interactions, she finds herself just overwhelmed with emotions. She pursues him, he pursues her. And Pavarotti is like Ferdinand, he's a king. He says, I don't really much care about my reputation. I don't care about my wife. I don't care about how my kids are going to be looking at this. I'm in love. And he leaves everything. I mean, he still continues to sing, but him and I think this woman get married. So there's a lot of confusion, and a lot of struggle, and a lot of pain and discomfort you go through until you reach a point of stability. There is this poem by Hafiz, هیچ راهی نیست کان را نیست پایان غم مخور, that it doesn't really matter how much you're struggling or how much pain you're going through. All journeys eventually will come to an end. In other words, all roads, there is a dead end. There is a point where you will reach your destination. There's a point where you look at your cancer and you say, I think it'll be okay. Death after all isn't too bad. It's much better than going through pain all the time. I mean, you struggle for like many, many years or months until you say, it's okay. So if you're able to survive the confusion, especially if you're confused about something that has some value, and I know it's subjective, the idea of ethics and morality and the value judgments that we insert into things, but the cheesy example I always come up with is Snoop Dogg offers you various pieces of advertisement, and Socrates offers you different kinds of advertisement. They both bring about pleasure, but one is delayed. For Socrates, you have to kind of just hang around him for about 5, 6, 10 years. Snoop Dogg, maybe a week. So the end of the road for Snoop Dogg is about 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 weeks, whereas for Socrates, it's about maybe 5, 6 years, which means that if you're going to follow Socrates, you're going to have confusion and despair and sorrow as your perhaps most faithful companions for the maybe first 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And the only person who can kind of provide you some solace, some shade, an oasis of sorts in the middle of nowhere is Socrates. Very much if you've seen the movie The Matrix, the only person who can kind of satisfy the curiosities of Thomas Anderson is Morpheus. That's the only person. And it sucks because you have about 6 or 8 billion people on this planet, and the only person who's able to provide you some shade from the scorching sun is, just one person. And that's a tremendous amount of power and control to be lost. You feel abandoned, betrayed. You have jealousy in all sorts of crazy ways. It's what they call, you become a maniac. It's a goddess for the ancient Greeks. So, is it? I'm not sure if it's accurate or true, but from what little I know, that the concept of absurd was coined by a man named Albert Camus, an Algerian philosopher who was a very good friend to Jean-Paul Sartre. But their friendship kind of went down the toilet because the French were assaulting Algerians for a long time, and Sartre wasn't able to kind of detach himself from his culture, the French culture, and side with the Algerians. And in as much as Camus wanted Sartre to kind of open his eyes a little bit and see what's happening, it's kind of like what's happening with Israel and Palestine, that you actually have people defending Israel, which makes no sense, but that's for a different day perhaps. And so coming to realize that perhaps Jean-Paul Sartre is all talk, even though he really wasn't in many ways, their friendship just didn't survive. There is a story that Albert Camus was very fond of. There's also a story that, the same story that Friedrich Nietzsche was very fond of, and it's called The Myth of Sisyphus. Now, Nietzsche created his own story of Sisyphus in the story of madmen. So let me just tell you the story of the madman first, and then we'll go to Sisyphus. Let me also, before doing both of those things, let me just say the following. Right now in Iran, my country, 1 out of every 2 marriages end up in divorce. So in as much as my mother and my father and all the old school or perhaps the previous generation would advertise how beneficial marriage is to the human psyche, when you look at the culture, when you look at society, when you look at some of the kind of toxic environment or components that live in society, you would kind of walk away saying, why would anyone want to get married these days? It's just a bankrupt, company or institution. It's like any other business. You know, you look at the books and you realize they're 70% down, under, you know, they're gonna like just be crushed. You wouldn't give them all the money you've saved for the past like 2 decades for just your business to go down. And that's what marriage is. So what happens right now is, and because we are slowly, all of us are moving towards sensual desire. I mean, that's what capitalism does. That's what technology does. It kind of removes mythology. It removes psychological narratives from you, and all you can really grasp on and have your senses touch are just the things that you see. 19th century becomes a very interesting time, because by the time you get to the 19th century, society has been broken up into like 1,001 pieces. You know, religion no longer makes any sense, and it really doesn't have much power over, you know, people's lives. The church has no power. People have come to realize that corruption is everywhere, but especially in the Catholic Church. Then you have 2 world wars. You know, and for the past like many thousands of years, you and I believe that there is something really noble about human beings. We are compassionate, we are generous, we are kind. We have the potential to kind of realize the kingdom of God within, or the Buddha seed within, or the light of Muhammad within. But what fierce disagreements ultimately reveal is that we are just savages, and we are disguising our savagery by hiding behind like ideas. I mean, imagine like a 20-year-old. And 20-year-olds, by default, have to be confused because they're new to life, right? And so they go somewhere and they read and read and read and read, and they come to class and they raise their hand and they use big words and they use big ideas. And of course, someone who's not familiar with this stuff says, oh, wow, the 20-year-old is so profound. No, the 20-year-old is just a savage. The only difference is that you haven't read enough books to hide behind ideas. That person has, okay? Then you have big cities where, look at this. You guys have been in this class for 8 weeks. You don't know each other's names. You don't have coffee with one another. You rarely come to pay me a visit. I mean, there is no interaction. You walk here as a stranger. You leave as a stranger. You come here lonely. You leave lonely. And that's what Marx was eventually talking about. That what happens in our modern society is that all of us become strangers to ourselves and to other people. And just in case someone says to you, I want to really get to know you. I mean, it's a really ridiculous and stupid question to ask anyone. How do I get to know you? Know what exactly? I'm confused. There is nothing to know. The only thing you can really get to know about me is that I am confused and I'm suffering and I'm just faking it. Okay? And it's something that Karl Marx had argued, that we are alienated, you know. And so World War II happens. Viktor Frankl survives in the Nazi camps. He comes up with the term logotherapy. Your problem is not your marriage. Your problem is not school. Your problem is that there is no meaning to be found anywhere. There is no meaning in sex. There is no meaning in taking classes. There is no meaning in any relationship. You just can't find meaning. And even if there is meaning, it only survives for 10 seconds and then it departs. And what happens to a human being who desires control? And control and power allow you to create meaning. And when that meaning is not there, well, what the hell do you do? Well, you get depressed. And so he had argued that what we need is logotherapy. We need to change our culture. آدمی در عالم خاکی نمی آید به دست آدمی دیگر بباید وزن آدمی. That if you really want to make a human being, you have to change the world. In other words, you have to change your physical environment. You can't hang out with Snoop Dogg and come to class and say, I like philosophy. It doesn't work that way. If you really, really want to fall in love with philosophy first, fall in love with the philosopher, and then hopefully in time you fall in love with his or her philosophy. And then once you become relatively proficient, then you realize your own organism will not allow you to go anywhere near Snoop Dogg. But you can serve 2 masters initially, okay? And so the notion of absurd given to us by Albert Camus really has to do with the fact that modern society has nothing to offer anyone. I mean, some of you in this class are women. Do you know how difficult it is to find a relatively mature man? And as a man, I will tell you, you will not find a mature human being, a mature man, in a body of a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old. It's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how well they think and how well they speak. They're just not ready. And that's devastating for a woman whose body at a certain point screams to have babies. And then you look at this and you say, this must be a joke. You know, it's absurd that I desperately desire companionship. And yet, out of all these many millions of men, they all suck. That you, as a 25-year-old woman, have to babysit a 30-year-old man so you could grow up a little bit. Now, so let's do Nietzsche, and then let's do Albert Camus, and let's do the myth of Sisyphus. Nietzsche, first of all, they say he was gay. I don't know if it's true, but if he was, that would be devastating for the century in which he lived. Because it's not like the 21st century. People frown on those things. You know. He despised one of the men that his sisters married. He was some sort of a Nazi. He was also an introvert. He tried to hide behind his big, bushy mustache. So first you need to understand that introverts, the moment they're born, they feel as if something about them is not wired the right way. They're always lost, they're always confused, they're always like swallowed by a tornado of emotions. And that's who Nietzsche is. He would sit in his room, just write and write and write and write. So the story of Madman is this. Before I tell you the story of Madman, let me say a couple of things about Diogenes, the ancient Greek philosopher who was one of the founders of the Cynic school. Cynic school. Cynicism. That you paint life with a paintbrush, but the paint you use is not pink, and it's not white, and it's not blue, it's just black. Because you're always going to see life half full. You're always going to see human nature at play, and you're never going to trust human nature. Never, ever, ever trust human nature. It's like someone who suffered trauma at the age of 5. And they're just very frightened to get into any relationship in a very serious way. Okay? Socrates would walk around his entire life asking for a just human being. Someone in whom the intellect, the emotions, the physical body, they're all in harmony. They know right from wrong. They know what things are valuable, what things are not so valuable. But they can think well, they can feel well, they can live well. Diogenes, the story has it that in broad daylight, like this classroom, the door opens, Diogenes comes in with a lit lantern or a flashlight. And all of us in this class are a little puzzled. The lights are on, the sun is out. We don't need a flashlight. Save your battery for when it's dark. He says, no, you don't understand. Though externally or physically things may be lit, the truth is psychologically we're in darkness. What's the use of being able to see, but not being able to see the right things? There is this wonderful, I think, verse that comes from one of the Gospels, and I forget which, where one of the Pharisees goes to Jesus and says, so you're saying that we who can see are blind? And he kind of looks at them and says, if you were blind, you would be without sin. But since you say you see, your sin remains. It's kind of like someone who has suffered a trauma and they assume that they can see well enough to kind of guide their own lives. And it's going to take them like 50, 60, 70 years to realize they've been going in circle for the past many, many, many decades. And then they say, only if there was someone in my life who would slap me to make me forget, force me forget all those episodes, so I could begin to see things from anew, from fresh. Okay. And so Diogenes comes around with a lit lantern, and people say to him, turn it off. And hello, hello. And he says, Socrates for the longest time was looking for a just human being. I'm not that profound. I'm just looking for a human being. That though someone may look at you and from the outside you look like a human being, that there is no humanity inside you. In other words, you don't have the proper intellectual tools to kind of guide your life in a way that you can be proud of, so to speak. So Nietzsche borrows this story in his own way, and madman. Kendra. Should we, like, Skyler?
Talked about how when you fall in love with someone,
Or what?
you have talked a lot about how when you fall in love with someone, they take up like a lot of like space in your mind. You get some obsession about them. And I was wondering how, like, is there like a relationship between love and hate in the way that a lot of times you see people also become obsessed with something or someone that they hate and it gets under their skin and they'll see something unrelated and that's their first thought.
I can't claim to have understood everything that you have said. There were some keywords, so I'll just focus on them. And it may be completely unrelated to your question, but nevertheless. Be on pause for a moment. Amen. I'll respond to some of the things you said through a fable given to us by Aesop, the wonderful, I think he was Greek fabulist. There's a fox, and you probably have heard the story. There's a fox, he loves grapes. And so, and foxes are known for their cunningness, they're really, really smart. And so as he's walking, he sees some grapes. And then he begins to salivate. He says, I want some. But there's a barrier, there is this fence that he has to go through before to get to the grapes. So he can't jump over it because the fence is too tall. He can't go through it because the space is narrow. So he puts his hand through the fence and he's unable to reach it. And he tries, and he tries, and he tries, and he tries. Now, one of the things that happens when you want something and the want all of a sudden brings in this component you call need. Now what you want is also emotionally charged. And when you play with that a little bit, you become kind of obsessed with that desire. I want that, I need that. And everything else disappears. And that's one of the beauties of passion, that the moment you become passionate about something or with something, pain and discomfort and suffering comes your way. And it doesn't matter what you're passionate about. That is what passion does. That's what needs do. And to satisfy any need, you need resources. Without resources, eventually your own organism will shuts down after a good amount of depression or sadness or loneliness. And then hopefully in time will disappear. You'll forget. Okay. So after many hours of trying to grab some grapes but unable to, this cunning, smart fox begins to experience emotions such as, this is irritating me and agitating me and frustrating me. Becoming really confused as to why, despite all of my cunningness, I can't reach the grapes. And then becomes angry at God, at himself, at the grapes, at the owner, at the fence. So you blame everyone. And then after many tries, You eventually have to accept the reality. But you do something really, really interesting. As you walk away from the grapes, having none in your hands, you look at the grapes and you say, they kind of looked unripe. And they're probably sour. You know what? I think God loves me. Because I know that if God didn't like me, He would have had me reach the grapes, eat the grapes, and suffer a bellyache. And then I'd probably have to be rushed to Kaiser. But because I couldn't reach the grapes, because God loves me. And that's one of the magical things that we do. After many tries and realize you don't have the power or the resources to achieve or to obtain what you want, you create a story, a fake story, but you create it for good reasons. You create it to survive. I didn't get him or I didn't get her because of A, B, C, D. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. You can't hate something you don't care about. And you can't hate something that you have no memory of. You care because you're attached. And you're attached because there's an emotional background. Indifference is that your ex is coming straight at you. You look at him or her. The memories come back, but they have no power over you. You don't really care. You've understood a few things about yourself, about him, about relationships, about love, about where you are in life, the sort of things that you want. And all of a sudden you become indifferent. Can I tell you a story? Do you mind? You sure? I mean, your question is really, really good. But all of a sudden, I'm a Democrat, so I flip-flop all the time. Anyone else with any other questions before we go home? No one? Nothing? So, Sisyphus. Are we good? There is a king whose name is Sisyphus. I know we were going to talk about Nietzsche's madman, but forget that. But let me talk about. No, it's okay. So Sisyphus is a king. And he gets drunk with power. And that's what happens to all of us. You have health, you never think about sickness. You're comfortable, you never think about discomfort or pain or suffering. So, metaphorically speaking, whenever your life is going relatively well, consider yourself to be sitting on your throne. Hello, hello. But Sisyphus, this king, comes to realize something really, really interesting, that despite all of his power, there is this thing about life that has a little bit more power than Sisyphus does. Life can take away your life, i.e. death. It can knock on your door anytime, and it waits patiently. Sisyphus is afraid of death, and for good reasons. I never took writing a will seriously until I was told I have to do a triple bypass. Then I frantically just ran around trying to look for ways to write this will. And luckily, I had a student from many, many years ago, and she married this really, really nice man who happens to be a lawyer for the living and the dead. And so I called him and said, "Can you do this?" He says, "Yeah." "When are you dying?" I said, "Soon." So I need to do this ASAP. And then you say, well, if I was to die, who's going to pay the mortgage? If I was to die, who's going to take care of my wife? Who's going to get the car? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And all of a sudden you realize death is a serious business. There's lots of politics involved. But besides that, you know, Carmen, what's going to happen to you when you come to class on Tuesday? I'm not here. You may be sad a little bit, but after a few minutes or few hours of your emotions slowly dissipating, you're going to raise your hand, look at my dean, Tariq, and ask him, "So, are we going to get an instructor? Because I need this class to graduate." And something very interesting happens. After a few minutes, you realize, yeah, you cared for me a little, but I am forgettable. There are lots of people like me. You're a king, and there have been kings before you. They're all buried. No one remembers you once you die. All of us are forgettable, and we are forgettable for one simple reason. We have small lives. We don't do anything with it. I mean, that's devastating. That you go through life for 50, 60, 70 years. You learn how to ride your bike. You get done with school. You get a job. You get married. You have kids. Then you die. And after a few weeks, your husband, your wife remarry. And your kids just like live their own lives. I mean, it's a fact of life. But it's a fact of life that's very difficult to embrace. And that is what Sisyphus is going through. It's not that he's scared of death. He's scared of being forgotten, and that's devastating. I don't know how many in this class have ever had boyfriends or girlfriends that you were madly in love with, and they dumped you. And then lo and behold, a week or 2 or 3 later, you see them holding hands with a stranger walking around the lake. And sure, you're angry, but there is, I think, a more evolved way of looking at this, which is, am I really that easily forgotten? And the answer is, well, yes. And you're easily forgotten because Karl Marx was right. As a woman, the only appeal that you have for a man is your body. No man is mature enough to go beyond your physical body. And once he or she is saturated, you can. And so Sisyphus says, I don't want to be forgotten. I want to make sure that I'm always remembered. And the only way you cannot be remembered is if you have done something interesting with your life, like a Malcolm X, like a Hitler, like a Mussolini, like a Jesus Christ, like a Socrates. It matters very little. I mean, all of us deep down are looking for immortality. I want to make sure that when you go home, you think about me. That I don't have to compete with your ridiculous math class, with your stupid boyfriend. Yuck. And when I realize I stand no chance, I can't compete with the world of advertisement that lives inside you, I eventually just give up. So fuck it, it's not worth it. If I can be forgotten this easily after 8 weeks, I have no power. So I'm not going to invest more time. And that's the thing. When you realize that eventually life is going to have you, then you say, okay, what should I do with life that's meaningful? And the truth is nothing. And yet you have to continue to live. And in living, you have no choice but to be engaged. What are you going to do? Drop out of school and do what? Go to the forest, walk around, take pictures, sell your pictures, and then what? And so what King Sisyphus does, it goes to Zeus's house. Zeus is like down here, and Zeus was a naughty little male of a god. Even though he was married to Hera, he loved Semele, a mortal woman down here. Yeah. And so Zeus isn't home, and so King Sisyphus goes through the window and is trying to look for immortality. If Zeus can be immortal, I want to know that magic potion, like Harry Potter. You know, where can I find it? Is it under his bed, in the closet, where? And then he is looking for this magic. The door opens, and it's Zeus. What are you doing here? I'm King Sisyphus. I know who the hell you are. What are you doing here? It's my house. I will die. Yes, you will. I don't want to. You must. The idea of being forgotten, it's devastating. He says, okay, I'll make you immortal. One condition. He says, doesn't matter, I'll do whatever you say. You'll wake up every morning, you'll toast your bagel, put some cream cheese, make some coffee. After you're done with your breakfast, you'll wear your shoes, go outside, and there's this boulder, this huge rock. All you have to do is just push it up the hill. That's all you got to do. And then your task is to push this huge rock over the hill. Okay, I'll do that. And so Sisyphus wakes up, pushes this rock up the hill. He's about to throw this rock over the hill, only to realize he's very, very exhausted. So he takes, a step to the side, and the rock just rolls back down near his house. And he does this over and over and over and over again. And then he comes to realize something really, really interesting. Death is not a punishment. Death is a gift bestowed upon human beings. It's the only way you're released from life. And what is life, Carmen? When I was born, I screamed for my mom to nurse me, and she did. And I was pushed into silence. When I got to be 3, I screamed for a bicycle, and my father got me the bike. When I was 5, I screamed for a soccer ball. When I was 10, I screamed to be on a soccer team. When I was 17, I screamed for a car. When I was 21, I screamed to have a girlfriend. When I was 25, I screamed to graduate. Then I screamed to have a job. Then I screamed to save some money. Then I screamed to buy a house. Then I screamed to buy a marriage. Then I screamed to buy children. Then I screamed to get a good doctor. Then I screamed for a good death. And if you pay attention, the common denominator in all stages of my life, the only thing I have done, and I've done really, really well, is screaming. I scream because I desire. I scream because there is a rock to be pushed up the hill. It never ends. Life is both a curse and a blessing. I know, like me, you assume that once you're done with Laney, you'll go to Stanford. Stanford is great, give you a good amount of power. And with that power, you'll probably find yourself a job or a man or a woman, whatever. And that's great too. But that'll satisfy you for just a couple of weeks, maybe a year if you're lucky. And then out of desperation, because you're so unhappy, you look at your companion and say, it's time for a baby. And then you realize, babies suck. Children are not fun. Do you enjoy cleaning your house? No. That's what children demand. You have to clean them all the time. Physically, emotionally, mentally. It just never ends. To this day, my mom calls me, Amir, I didn't like what you said. All right, Mom, sorry. Everything we do in life is to satisfy a desire. That's it. The only thing I think that you could hope for is to pursue a desire that gives you meaning for a long time before it is pushed into retirement. I enjoy teaching, but I can feel what's happening to me now. I enjoy it less. And there is going to come a day where I won't walk to class. And I wouldn't care what my wife says. I wouldn't care what my kids say. I'll probably just pack up my stuff and just leave completely. That's absurd. And even if my life was to be completely absurd, I look into the culture for some sort of a meaning, some sort of a value. But a culture such as this, or any culture these days, there is nothing. But this I will tell you, despite how ridiculous my life has been thus far, it has been filled with meaning from the age 18 when I met Hussein, all the way to right now. And even when I retire, if I don't suffer from dementia or a heart attack or anything, if my faculties are relatively healthy, I will continue to write about all the things that I'm inspired to write about because of Hussein. And that's a good amount of meaning to have. Now, my parents don't suffer from the sort of confusion that most of us in this class suffer from. Why? Because for them, religion matters. For them, politics matter. For them, marriage matters. For them, a woman is supposed to be a mother, and a mother is supposed to raise her kids and protect her kids until the day she dies. So she calls all of her kids, 3 of them, 5 times a day, just to harass them. And once in a while, jokingly, I say, Mom, I teach, I know this stuff. I know the way you think. It's no good. You're just immature, Amir. I said, okay. But for us these days, the things that used to give our parents value, they no longer give us value. But the concept of absurd is there, nevertheless. گردون کمری ز عمر فرسوده ماست، دریا اثری ز اشک آلوده ماست، فردوس دوزخ شرری ز رنج بیهوده ماست، فردوس دمی ز بخت آسوده ماست. That if you want to know how the oceans were made, all the human beings who have come through time, their tears, their struggle, their suffering, their pain, their disappointment, they shed tears every single day. That's the reason why we have oceans. If you want to know what hell is, these moments where you wake up and you say, man, everything I have done in my life has been a waste. Regret, remorse, irritation, agitation, there isn't much you can do. And Firdaus, if you want to know what paradise is, peace, comfort is, once in a while, you fall in love for maybe 2 weeks. You just wake up in a good mood. You say, whatever I touch is going to turn into gold. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. So, that was Omar Khayyam. You guys are so serious.
Not in church. Find a great.
What?
Find a great. Celebrate.
I don't really want to go to Roseville today. I've celebrated this ridiculous ceremony for the past like 60 years. It's good, don't get me wrong. It's good for the kids. It's good for to see family and friends. Sometimes you find yourself in the zone, and that zone may be one of depression where you write poetry. Sometimes you find yourself in the zone of just being happy, and you just sing and you dance and you walk around naked, and it's wonderful. Sometimes you desire to celebrate something because in that particular moment where you are, the only thing you've encountered is the routine of life, groundhog. That you do the same thing over and over and over again. And there is something that you desperately want and need to kind of bring you back to life. It's one of those existential mottos, which is if Socrates had said that the unexamined life is not worth living, which in itself has a lot of flaws, because I'm not sure if the examined life is worth living. Because once you examine your life, you may realize it's nothing but the myth of Sisyphus. You just keep doing the same thing, in a variety of different ways. Sometimes you realize that life is just boring. Maybe this class is boring and you keep looking at the clock. And it's a thing you begin to worship because when it hits 10:45 or 10:15, you celebrate your exit. You don't want to be here. Boredom enslaves you. 10:45 frees you from the bondage of boredom. That's a thing to be celebrated, So I think there is something intrinsic, innate inside all of us, that there is something that says, life has a tendency of sucking the life out of you. At the same time, you have also this desperate need, like Eve, Sheva, to find something that can breathe life inside you. Again, going back to the motto I never shared, I want to feel my own existence. That's what a good existentialist would say. Life doesn't allow me to feel myself, So I'm desperately looking for something. And, sometimes you drink and it happens. Sometimes you have sex and it happens. And sometimes you have a good conversation, it happens. Any? About what? So the famous saying that you will encounter in one of the Gospels is that unless you become a child, you will not enter the kingdom of God. But you and I have kids, Abby. Their innocence is not one of intelligence. Their innocence is just, they're naive. They have no experience in life. They're just stupid. Out of that particular stupid innocence that live inside them, they go near the stove. They run, in the streets. They grab a knife and run with it. They grab a scissors and run with it. They are innocent, and they're innocent because they have zero life experience. I think the sort of innocence that someone like Jesus or Lao Tzu or someone like Socrates will talk about is imagine for a moment that you're in a relationship. Nothing wrong with it. It's become the myth of Sisyphus. You go home, you wash dishes, you cook, you clean, you take care of the kids. There's your husband, you say hello, you guys are intimate for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, like once every 5 years. And once in a while, as you're sitting and eating food, you kind of whisper to yourself, what the hell am I doing here? What the hell is all of this, right? It's common, there's nothing wrong with it. We all experience it at different stages. And you don't have to be married for that. And so, You're walking the streets. Again, remember, nothing is wrong with your relationship except that it has entered the stage of boredom, responsibility, avalanche of obligations. And then as you're jogging around the lake, you pass by this man. And, it's like something zaps you. Whoa. It's one of those things that, if you study Tantric really, really well, and if you're familiar with some of the mysteries of the occult, really something really profound happens to you. And you kind of stop jogging, you turn around and you say, maybe I should jog the other way. And then you begin to stalk this person. And it's an interesting phenomenon because we live in a culture that emphasizes monogamy and frowns on going outside of certain lines. It's considered like cheating. And so you begin to second guess yourself, or you begin to doubt yourself, and you begin to punish all the ways you feel. But as long as those emotions are have not yet contaminated you, there is something about you that says, you know what? I want to pursue this. And it doesn't mean that you don't love your life, and it doesn't mean that you don't love your companion. But it does suggest that, kind of like the myth of Sisyphus, that you have forgotten what love is, you have forgotten what passion is, you have forgotten what it means to be alive in a relationship. And, it's kind of like children. If children don't like something, they are the truest and the purest of existentialists. If they don't like broccoli, if they don't like to play soccer, they will tell it to you. They will scream, and you have to grab them by the throat and pull them. Adults are very, very different. Adults are very, very easily manipulated, And so something about you says, I enjoy life. I enjoy the spark. Naked I came and naked I will go. That I came naked, society writes on me. There comes a point I look at all the writings that live inside me, and I say, yeah, it gives me power, it gives me control, it gives me a house, but I want a home. It gives me a marriage, but I want love. And what you really want to do is you want to retrieve your innocence that is filled with passion. You want to exist in life and you want to play with life. You have children, you take them to park. And you know what happens when you take them to park? As opposed to when they're in your home. In home, they sit and they draw. You entertain them in some ridiculous thing. At the park, man, they grow wings and they fly. And that's one of the beauties of, say, Socrates and Plato, Pegasus. That there comes a point that Plato says, I don't really care about my parents. I don't care about religion. I don't care about politics. I don't care about life. Even when Morpheus looks at Thomas Anderson and says to him, there is the blue pill and there is the red pill. Take the blue pill and you can wake up in your bed and you can think whatever you want to think. But take the red pill. I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Now, you have to come to a place, and I don't think it's something that you do reflectively. You have to have been discontent with life for a long, long, long time. And then all of a sudden, a magical human being walks into your life. And all these emotions, like floodgate, opens. And you just get consumed. And then you look at Sargon and say, bite me. I want to fly. I have felt my wings. And I don't care what other people say. And I don't care about my belief system anymore. I want to fly. And Socrates says, fine. But you do know that as we go higher, you will desire less to be down here, and you will desire more to fly, to soar to the heavens. And Plato doesn't really know what that means. But as he gets closer, he says, bite me harder. I want to go even higher. So innocence in the adult world could be profoundly dangerous. I mean, even examine when you have belly laughs. And then if you happen to be in a reflective mood, you say, you know, most often I just have the stupid grin on my face, but tonight I really laughed with my soul. But it is a little frightening. Because life is not about innocence, life is about politics. Life is about responsibilities and obligations. I mean, you need to write your essay saying, I don't give a shit what Amir says. I don't care what he thinks. I don't care what my grade is. I am looking at this audio. There are some things I like, and I'm going to write about them. I'm not going to sit and think. I'm just going to allow things to just ooze out of me. And you have to be at a certain place where your emotions are not just checked by your intellect all the time, which Martin Luther around the 15th century had called the whore of Athens. You know, you want to have sex with this person because you love them, but your intellect comes in. Are you having sex because of the body, emotions? Are you depressed? Are you lonely? And before you know it, this innocence that is the outcome of passion, love, just goes away. And nothing can withstand the power of reason. It's impossible. Reason creates lots of doubts. My only recommendation is that if you have experienced innocence as an adult, living in the adult world, keep it to yourself. Some things are not meant to share with anyone. Justin.
Second assignment coming up on the 23rd here. Is it the same concept as the last assignment?
Oh yeah, they're all the same. Anyone else with, yeah.
Our presupposition all parts of
What exactly do you mean?
presuppose something or assume something like this.
Okay, so let me do it this way. And I don't mean to be offensive. It's just an analogy, okay? When I usually walk to class, I assume that nobody knows anything. It doesn't matter how big of ideas and how big of words they use. I always go back to my own life experience, which is the best book that I can read. You're not married yet. You're not 60 yet. You haven't graduated yet. You don't really have much of a savings account that the money has come from your own blood and sweat. You're not an immigrant. You haven't been depressed. You haven't had a teacher. But none of those things mean that you can't have ideas. You can. You don't understand what you're talking about. Now, is that the right assumption? For me, it is. Does that mean I won't take you seriously when you raise your hand and ask questions? For me, that means yes. Now, am I doing it because I don't respect you? No. I assume because you happen to assume that you actually know what you're talking about when in fact you don't. It's like someone who hasn't resolved some of the stuff that live inside them, and they keep saying, I'm ready for a relationship. It's a great assumption, and it's a great event to walk into. It's just not going to last. Am I dark and gloomy? Am I making all the wrong assumptions? There's a good chance that 90% of your tries in any relationship are going to fail. I never speak about old age with my father. He's 30 years my senior. I have no idea what it means to be 90. As you have no idea what it means to be 60. And you have no idea what it means to actually apply these ideas on ground. But you can have great ideas about justice. It doesn't mean anything. As bumper stickers go, it's really good. But that's all they're reduced to, bumper stickers. Well, it's good to see all of you. Have a nice weekend. I will see you soon. Anna, you take care.
You too.
Thank you for.
Have a nice weekend.
You too. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Big fly. For my father.